Good afternoon. Welcome to Live Youth Work Conversations. You're very welcome. Today we're talking about change management and we have some brilliant people to talk with. Let me introduce myself first of all. My name's Johnny Masters. I am the Youth, Children and Families Missioner for the Diocese of Chester. I've been doing that for 3 years and I'm really excited we're going to get to hear from some really great people. First of all, my old line manager, who I'm very excited to see today because I haven't seen her for a long time, so it's really nice to see her. Lynn Weston, welcome. Could you introduce yourself a bit more and tell us a bit about yourself?
Yeah, great to meet you all. I like the way you said old line manager. You mean your young line manager? I'm Lynn and I work for the London Institute of Contemporary Christianity, known as LICC. I'm the National Director of Church of England Relations, so enjoying working all over the country with dioceses, especially on setting God's people free and everyday faith. Before that, as Johnny says, I worked as Director of Mission in the Diocese of Chester. And before that, I spent 27 years in global banking, leading strategic change, worked on all sorts of different transformation programs. And in case you wonder, I did start when I was 2.
That's why Lynn can still say that she's young. Who shall I introduce? I'll go for Jonathan next. I've changed. My full name is Jonathan, but I'm going with Johnny because we'll save confusion for today. And most people call me Johnny eventually anyway. So this is Jonathan Wood. Jonathan, would you like to introduce yourself and tell us a bit more about?
Yeah, hi, thanks, Johnny. Hello, everybody. Good to see you all. So I'm Jonathan Wood. I'm the Chief Executive and Diocesan Secretary for the Diocese of Leeds. So I've been doing that for 6 months. So I started the week before we went into lockdown. So one of the first things I did was shut the offices and then shut the churches and shut the schools. So it's been an interesting sort of first 6 months. Prior to that, I worked for Her Majesty's Courts and Tribunal Service and spent most of my career working for them and the Ministry of Justice. Latterly, I was the National Services Director in HMCTS, which basically meant running lots of things, but actually being responsible for large change programs. So I've done my fair share of change programs across government, some going well, some going differently to how we were intended, and sort of seen it from all angles and all sides.
They could do with a change program at the moment, I think, of some description in government. I don't know what that would be. Is that a bit too political? Whoops. Dawn, over to you.
I'm Dawn. I'm one of the team members for Children, Young People and Families at the Leeds Diocese. That's it.
Thank you. So we like to start our little sessions with an icebreaker, just for those of you who are taking a little while to log on or getting your internet working because it's gone down like mine did a minute ago. So really simple icebreaker. Think about one aspect of your personality, okay, that you are happy to share. And then you've got 10 seconds to find an object somewhere near you in the room or just outside the room to grab it, and that represents that aspect of your personality. And I've just realized I didn't prepare for this at all, so I need to grab something as well. So are you ready? Okay, 10 seconds starts now. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Beep, 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 beep. Oh, just in time. On again now, though. Just in time, Jonathan. Well done. Right. Dawn, we'll go in reverse order to that which we went last time, so you can go first.
So I didn't even leave the desk. It's right beside me. So this is a little dog that actually came from Blackpool. You know those machines where you put your 2p's in and they kind of slide things out? I stood and I watched this man kind of putting his 2p's in, waiting for these like loads of little key rings to come out, and eventually it did. And I stood at the side and I was like cheering, going, yeah, I'm so excited for you. And he was like, okay, strange lady, you have the dog. And I'm like, no, I don't want the dog. But actually this represents me because I am a cheerleader and sometimes get random dog presents. I'll put it back.
Thank you. Jonathan, if we're going reverse order, over to you.
It's me next. It's me next. So the reason I was a bit late was because we've only just moved back into our house, having decided that lockdown was a great time to do building work whilst living in it, and then living with in-laws and things like that. So my house is a bit of a mess, but I recovered this from the shed today, which is a Karcher window vac. And the reason why I've determined that this is the thing that explains me is because I like really pointless gadgets. There is actually no need to have one of these, but I really like the feeling of hoovering up water. And I have lots of pointless gadgets. I don't know what that says about my personality, other than like I like to find different ways of doing normal tasks that most people would just get a cloth. But I decided to buy one of these. I bought it on Amazon, so it was cheap, but that's what I decided.
I have so many questions, but I'm not going to ask any of them right now. Lynn.
And I like colour, I like joy and happiness and colour. So all on my desk, I've got all these colourful things. I've brought lots of objects. I never like to stick to one thing when I'm asked for one. Why not bring 7? But lots of colour. And I think especially at the moment, there's just a lot of stuff going on in the world. And I think it's really important for us to go round where we are in our context and just splash colour all over it, especially God's colour when we can.
I feel like my answer was really unchristian, so I apologise, everybody.
No, your answer was fine. My answer is just going to be about poo, so don't worry about it. This is Winnie the Pooh. I've always loved Winnie the Pooh since forever, really. Even when I was a teenager, I had a bedroom that was a Winnie the Pooh themed bedroom. And the reason I love Winnie the Pooh is just because they're really good friends. And I really like to be with friends, but also to encourage my friends and support my friends. And I think Winnie the Pooh does that with his friends really well. So that's why I've chosen Winnie the Pooh. And it's quite a large one, as you can see. That's in next to my head.
Large Pooh. He's gorgeous.
So yeah, he lives there in here. Right, thank you all. That was great. Dawn, you're going to lead us through some questions today and the subjects. I'll hand over to you now.
Shall we
pray? Oh, I need
first?
to pray, don't I? Shall I pray? I'll pray. Forgot that bit. It's written there. I was too excited. Father God, we thank you for the opportunity today to chat together, to learn about change management, and to hopefully put something into place in our context that helps us to adapt as we need to, but also to encourage others to adapt as well when they need to as well. We pray you be with us, speak through us, and help us have a really useful afternoon and conversation. In your name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Thanks, Johnny. Thank you. So we're here to talk about change. So I read this afternoon that change is actually the only constant thing in the world other than God. Change is the only thing that is continual. And actually in this season that we're in at the moment, it is constant change. Johnny and I kind of explained it. They were almost waiting for waiting's sake at the moment. When can we change? When? And then we have different government guidelines coming out every single day. I know Jonathan loves those when they come out and all the churches go, help, what can we do next? But actually, even in youth ministry world, change is constant and all-consuming. And we've almost kind of got to a season of what I would call a dark season, really, where we're just kind of really just feeling the pressure to change. I was in a prayer meeting yesterday, and we were really kind of thinking and praying about how to repurpose a bus that had been bought specifically for youth ministry that obviously cannot be used in this season. So change is all around us. It's always on our minds at the moment. We have to find new ways to reach our young people, whether it's online or face-to-face, our communities, our neighbourhoods, those people that are peering in to look at our churches at the moment. We have to find and change. So change can be exciting, but actually change can also be kind of scary at the moment. You guys have got so much experience in change management, and that's what we really want to kind of focus on today, really. You look at different kind of change management structures, and there's loads of different models out there at the moment. But I wonder, and this is a question for any of you really, looking at the different kind of change curves and change models, what is the hardest part of change, of the change curve, And is it even worth it? Is change even worth it? Why not stick with what we've already got? And that's for anybody.
Dawn, do you want to put up that picture of the change curve? Because that might be good to start with that.
I can do that.
For some of you will be familiar with the change curve, and to me it's rather like the grief curve. Actually, it follows a very similar pattern, and there's lots of words on this, but one of the things I've always learned in leading change is you've got to allow people the space to feel their reality, and to feel it and name it honestly. I've been in a lot of sessions that have started with people saying, "Why are you excited to be here?" And there's people sitting there going, "I'm not excited to be here. You know, I'm actually really scared." And I remember once, I used to train change leaders in Bank of America. And I remember being in an auditorium with hundreds of people who were all like agents of change. And I asked how many people in that audience, and this was their full-time jobs, just to say, how many people loved change? And there was about 3 of us, you know, who really, really loved change. It's a scary thing. And I think this curve shows that when we realize that change is upon us, and often it's thrust upon us and it's not something we have chosen, there's 2 ways of responding, either with great excitement and positivity and anticipation, or absolute fear and anxiousness. And I think both are really real, and there's not one way of doing it. It's just how our body reacts naturally to it. And I think what happens there is we go into this dip then, and I think that can happen quite quickly. We go into this dip, and to answer your question, I think this is the really hard part. And in that, there can be all sorts of feelings like resistance, disruptive behavior, disbelief, real emotions. That's when you see everybody laughing out really loud or crying out really loud. Quite rude, and I think we see that a lot at the minute on social media. Let's be really nasty to each other, and that will really help us deal with this change that's going on. Lots of confusion. Sickness is really relevant there. People getting really stressed and getting ill with it. And I think what's really important in that part of the curve is that those who, for whatever reason, are equipped to deal with the change, that they have got the space to be creative and innovative and helpful and supportive. And it's key that they lift people out of that into the other part. Probably the analogy I'd give, it's like running a marathon. And I don't know if any of you have run a marathon, but I've run 6. And running a marathon is very different from sprinting. Up until my mid-30s, I was always a sprinter, an athlete, sprinter type person. Running a marathon is a whole different game. You get to 13 miles and you think, that was really tough. That was the toughest race of my life. And then you think, oh my goodness, I've got to do that race all over again. That's not the hard part. The hard part comes at 17 miles, and that's when you hit that dip and you really hit the wall. But what happens in a marathon, if for those of you who've been it, you'll know this, runners come along and they literally grab you by the elbows and they lift you to their feet, and you go, let me drop. And they go, no, we're going to run with you. And that happens somewhere between 17 miles and 21 miles. And then it's like something takes over at 21 miles and you just get the rest of the way in adrenaline. And I think that's the place we're in at this moment. I think we're in that low curve bit at the moment. And what we need is the runners who are really strong and resilient to grab some people by the elbows and get them up to the new beginning.
I love that analogy. I think I've not run a marathon, I've done a half and it killed me. but it is definitely, I really do think that we're in that low curve just there. Definitely.
We are. I totally agree with that. I mean, I think just to build on that change curve and what you said, Lynn, about it being a bit like the grief curve. I mean, it's a Kubler-Ross change curve actually came from the work they did on grief. So that's actually where they modeled it from. And I think for me, I agree with you on that low part. But the thing, I guess, that I would add to that, and it feels for how I am at the moment, is change isn't always a linear journey. That change curve, you don't just go from left to right along it. You go along it and then you get bounced around in it. And for me, the hardest bit of change is not when I get to the bottom of the first one. And it's not even sort of when I'm there, it's when I've just started to go up the other side, and then I get pushed back and go round the cycle, because I think that's where that resilience kicks in. And as I think about where we are now, you know, I felt like the last few months, if we look at that in the change curve, sort of August into September, we were coming out, it was quite positive. You know, we'd got our office open, Dawn and I were back in the office a little bit, things were starting to happen, youth work was going on, the guidance, and then it feels like we've been pulled back again. And I think that's where that becomes really difficult, and that bit of resilience kicks in. So I think in the change curve environment, for me, it's the cycling and having to dust yourself off and go again and go again. And I think sometimes it's just about accepting that's what happens, and rather than sort of constantly seeing it as a linear thing, you've just got to go back around that. So I think that's definitely what I would say in terms of relation to the change curve. I think for me, more generally, if I just to sort of throw a second provocation in, the thing I find difficult about change is once I know what the change is, and once I've got buy-in for it, and Lynn, I'm like you, I love change. Change is the when things stop changing, it gets boring. Change is the thing that makes things happen. But I think the thing I find personally hardest about change is once I've got a thing and I know what we're doing, is making space for other voices to check that that's still the right thing. And some of you might have been in the experience where you do all the work, you do the prep, you're in that point and you drive on, and actually you're in the heat of it and the everything that's going on. And actually the hardest thing I think about change is making the space for yourself to step out of the situation. There's a phrase I really love, which is about stepping onto the balcony. So you have the view from the balcony. So you look over the dance floor where everything's going on and go, actually, how is it going? And are we still on track with what we said we were doing? And have I made the right space for people to tell me if we're on track? And actually, that's a really brave thing to do. And it's a really hard thing to do. But actually, it's a really important thing to do for change. And so I think it's creating space for other views so that you don't just sort of get laser focused and sort of miss everything else that's going on.
Yeah, definitely. One of the comments has said that the cyclical thing is really true, especially in the season of COVID. So I wonder if you're in this kind of cyclical change and you kind of get peaks of highs and peaks of lows, how do you keep yourself motivated during that season of constant change? Has anyone got any tips?
Let me speak and then I'll give. So for me, it's about two things. It's about identity and it's about purpose.
Yeah.
So for me personally, how do I keep going? Because I know what my identity is. My identity is in who I am, not in what I'm doing. And I think that's, you know, really important for us as Christians. You know, my identity is as a child of God. It's not as a diocesan secretary, whoever one of them actually does and what that job title even means, which is like a whole new world. You know, it's about being a child of God. It's about doing what I'm meant to be doing. But actually, in terms of coping in cycles and that resilience, it's about purpose, and it's about having that confidence in the purpose that we're trying to do. So it doesn't matter where you are in the cycle, you can cling to the purpose as to why you're doing it. And probably my favorite thing about change management, and the only useful thing I think I can encourage anyone in this meeting is to go on Google. And if you've never watched a video by a guy called Simon Sinek on a TED Talk called The Golden Circle, just Google that after we finish talking, because he does a 7-minute thing on it's not the what and it's not the how, it's the why that's important. And actually for me, whenever I go round a cycle, it's always about why am I doing it? So it doesn't matter where I am on the journey, I still know why I'm doing it. So I know who I am and I know why I'm doing it. And actually those are the only two things that I've ever found that I can, if I think about the other stuff, I generally become a big quivering jelly mess of things. But if I think about those two things, it roots me a little bit.
Yeah, that's great. We'll get someone to pop that in the chat. I'm sure one of our colleagues will do that at some point and pop that in. Johnny, what are your views on change? Because obviously as youth leaders, we've been through a lot of change. We have to cope with a lot of change as well. Do you enjoy change?
Personally, I find change quite difficult. And I think that we can react, like that curve showed, we can react in different ways, and we've got to know how we react and how to best deal with that for ourselves. I think that identity and purpose stuff that Jonathan just explained, and that start with why, that's Simon Sinek's book that he's written, is really important to establish who you are and why you're doing what you're doing. And for me personally, a sense of calling as well enables me to, this is why I'm doing this. Every time I get stuff thrown at me for all different reasons, actually I can stand up again because God called me to this place. And I think when we are aware of that in our youth work context in our churches, we can get up again and we can keep going. And we've got to be aware that sometimes getting up again, we can take our time to do that. That's all right. Like, you're allowed to have a time of recovery. It's not just bounce back straight away every time. It's okay, I'm going to evaluate where I've been, what I've done, and then I'm going to learn from that and move forwards in a new direction, or even in the same direction but in a new way and with a new attitude. And I think that can be really powerful and helpful.
Yeah, I think especially because we're British, we have the saying, don't we? Get up and carry on, and we don't stop, we don't lament, we don't allow ourselves that time to say, okay, that season has passed, let's pray and move into the next season. Definitely. I'm going to direct this question to Lynn, although it is for everybody, because I know Lynn will love this question. So what happens about people that don't make the decisions that the change needs to happen? What happens about those people in second chair kind of change management? What happens? How can we motivate those to move along with us?
I was joking before this call started about I am the most rubbish second chair leader. You know, my natural response is to say, just shove them out of the way. I think it's really tough, and I think we have to name how tough it is when you're in a position where you might be in second chair leadership and you have a very clear vision of what needs to change, and the person in first chair leadership doesn't. It's a nightmare, and it's a nightmare especially for people who have got that clarity of vision. I think there's a number of different ways you have to deal with it. And one, I think it is sometimes in our own heads and hearts, we can have a really clear vision. I think what's really, really important is to get a group around you to bring that vision to life. And I think you will find that if that vision is absolutely rooted in prayer and you keep going back to its biblical foundations as a group, what you will find is that there is so much more to the vision than you already thought. So having a group around you, we've got lots of reference at the minute to the rule of 6. I'd say get 6 people around you and get that vision brought to life. In Habakkuk, it says, write it down on tablets of stone. Vision stuck in heads aren't going anywhere. Get it written down, and not sensitively, because when we write, other people will challenge it and critique it. Let them challenge the life out of it, because that will grow the vision, but write it down and bring it to life. And the other thing that I always say in change, which sometimes surprise people, I always pick, in change teams I've always led, I always pick people who really are different to me, who think differently, who look on the surface like they strongly disagree with me, have got very different personality types, and are the people when you're trying to share an idea with say, but, I just want to play devil's advocate. They're brilliant to have on your team. In the business world, we used to use something that was based on Walt Disney's model, which was allow space for a vision to come out. And in that space, nobody's allowed to say but or no to it. Just allow a place to envision and dream really big. Then leave that room and go into another room. And in that room, start to say, but, and critique it and bring it to life. And then leave that room and actually pull it to bits and allow all the cynics to go nuts. And then at the end of it, you normally have a really thought through vision. So my view would be, allow the space to bring out the vision and then critique it, and then make sure it's really well written. And then our role is to influence first chair leaders. And you know what? Normally when it's a change that's given from God, you will get no. You'll probably get no at least 20 times. And if it's God's work, it's going to be really hard. And you dig deeper and you dig deeper and you keep on with that vision. And what I would say is sometimes the visions God gives us, we don't always get to live them out. Sometimes you have to let them drop and you need to hand them over. And your role might be a prophetic role, just to say, that's the vision and you need to move on. And somebody else gets the glory of bringing that to life. So we have to be non-egotistical in this and just let it drop and move on when God instructs.
Yeah, I really like that. I love the idea of just kind of laying everything on the table and then no one is allowed to say. But I love that. I love change. I love change. Definitely. Jonathan, have you got any thoughts on second chair management as well?
Yeah, well, I've got a couple. Just the first one is I agree with what Lynn said about get a rule, but can if you're in the Diocese of Leeds, you can only have 5 people around you because you've got to be included in that 6, and I don't want us to break the law anywhere. No, I mean you should definitely get people around you. I think it's really important. I agree everything Lynn said. I think sort of thinking about my experience of in government trying to influence ministers and things like that. The things I've found that have sort of been useful and worked have been around that writing it down, about articulating the vision, but also I think looking for how you can bring about that vision or start that project in a small way to sort of establish some credibility. I think sometimes visions and projects don't get off the ground because people can't see the breadth of it and the investment is too big, whether it's time or risk or money, and trying to find ways to do incremental sort of piloting, or if we just did it there and tried it out and build a sort of a coalition around something that's tangible. I think that's really, really valuable. And I think certainly around in the church context and in the diocese sort of context of looking for small ways to do some pathfinders, but having a vision how you would grow it and stuff like that is really important as well, because actually it's much harder to argue with something tangible than it is with something theoretical. So looking for practical ways of doing it, I think would be really useful too. And that's certainly my sort of experience of people are less likely to say no if they've got something they have to say no to rather than an idea.
Yeah, definitely. And what about you, Johnny? I'm guessing that me and you have probably been in lots of second chair management positions. How have we coped with change?
I think what's been said has been really helpful, but also naming the problem, and you've got to make sure that people are aware there is a problem. Often in the church, we don't realise what a big problem it is, that we don't deal with children and young people very well. We don't welcome them very well necessarily. We keep them separate from the main church often. We put them to one side rather than incorporating them within the church family completely and wholly. And we have to name that as a problem and explain why it's a problem. And that can be quite difficult to do articulately, especially if but we've always done it this way and it's always worked before, but we've always had a Sunday school for the last 50 years, and why would you want to all be together in the church? Or whatever change you're trying to envision, there's always something against it, and you've got to name that. And that's why what Lynn said about having a team around you, and Jonathan naming 5 people rather than 6, so if you can get people singing your song with you, you will make a difference. And that's about getting people, again, not necessarily who agree with you, but it might be that you have a PCC or a leadership team in your church, and maybe you can talk to 1 or 2 of those people and hash it out with them a little bit, and then so you've got an advocate in that space alongside you, because you need advocates for that change to happen. But often only 2 or 3 people see the change that's needed at the start, and you've got to snowball that so that everyone recognizes it. Then the change can happen, and that takes a while.
Yeah, definitely. And we've got to remember that a lot of our young people and children are also having change kind of thrust upon them. And one of the most important things that we can do in this season is ask them, what is it that you want? I have a beautiful church in the middle of Leeds, and they're in quite a deprived estate context. And one of the first things they did was set up a family consultation. So they literally sat down their families in COVID secure environments, and, of course, and said, hey, what is it how can we best serve you? What can we do? And it's almost kind of when you open that conversation up, you're bringing those people automatically along with you. You have their buy-in, you have their support. change is so much easier when you bring people along with you. I know of a lady who for years said the same message over and over and over again: churches include children, churches include children, churches include children, to the point where she literally burnt herself out and she had to have early retirement. Change can be so hard. So how do we learn to look after ourselves in a season that is so crazy, where change is inevitable and people are resisting and going, oh, no, we'll just wait until we can go back to doing, we'll just wait until we can do this. How can we look after ourselves when we ourselves, or the three of us, I know, Johnny, maybe you might be converted to change after this, but how do we're so change driven, so change hungry.
Well, shall I go first then?
Yeah, you
because
go
I'm the one who
first.
likes it the least. I think there's a few things there. The first is to look for the opportunities that change brings. I read an article the other week about how people cope in the Arctic Circle with a winter that is almost completely dark all of the time. I think you shared it on Facebook as well, didn't you, Dawn?
Yeah, I loved it.
And it was about finding the opportunity and what that offers you. So it's an opportunity to be cozy and warm and to enjoy what you are. And the people who have flourished most during lockdown were those who enjoyed the opportunity to be with their family rather than worrying about the opportunities that they had lost. And obviously not everyone has a family to be with, but for those who could, that was a great experience. The other thing is, I think it is okay to try and keep something consistent. You don't have to have all of your changes all of the time, all at once. So there might be something that actually I really enjoy. So for me, it's walking the dog. I love to go outside and walk the dog, and that's the thing that I do. And whatever's happening, I make sure that I do that. For other people, it might just be sitting down for a meal with the family every day, or just something that's consistent that gives you life and restores you. I think that's really important, particularly at the moment with the changes that we're seeing that are not necessarily just changes within organizations, but changes around our own lives and how we live as people.
Yeah, definitely. Any other top tips? I like those. They were good.
I've got two. The first one is creative visualization. And this is something I learned years ago, and it just gets me through so much. And had a good deal of suffering in life. And when you can actually really imagine yourself into a situation, but looking to the future, looking at the path you're on. And I think Hebrews 12:1-3 is really pertinent for this time. If you don't mind, I'll just read a bit of that. Therefore, since we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, let us throw off everything that hinders and the sin that so easily entangles. And let us run with perseverance the race marked out for us, fixing our eyes on Jesus. I just love that part, fixing our eyes on Jesus, the pioneer and perfecter of faith. And when we can creatively visualize, okay, we're in this horrible thing at the minute, we're in this not nice place, this change is tough and it's hard. When we fix our eyes on Jesus and see the finish line, I think it puts us in a very different place. I know I've sat in pits of despair at some points in my life, and it's actually just looking out of the pit and looking up and seeing the light that's beyond is actually what's getting you through that. So a bit of imagining what the finish line looks like really helps. And the other one is a more practical one. I keep a personal resilience checklist, and it's just good every so often, especially at the minute, to just look at that. I've been checking it off this morning. Things like deciding what is really over for you. Have I, when we talk about a new reality at the moment, asking myself, what is gone from the life I knew? Let's have a reality check and let's name it. What really hurts me about that? What has this brought up about distinguishing between current losses and old wounds? What's this brought up in me about my old suffering? It's erupted again in me. And I've got like about 15 things on that personal resilience checklist. And it's just good to do that. And then once I've got the reality of that, just taking that to God and handing it over in prayer and saying, God, some of this is just too big for me. I actually don't know how I can handle this. I need your resilience. I need your strength. I'm giving it over to you.
Yeah, that's so good. So good. Yeah, I definitely start my day and finish my day in prayer. I think that's so important in this season when things are just so chaotic. Definitely just to kind of just lay it all down and just go, I don't have the answers. You're going to have to work through this for me, definitely. Jonathan, what about you? What are your top tips for resilience and perseverance?
I mean, stuff people have said is all good. I think something you said right at the beginning, Johnny, in one of your early answers, which is you've got to be a bit kind to yourself and give yourself time to get up and you know, not sort of be like back to your Winnie the Pooh. You know, you can't always be Tigger, can you? You can't always be that person. Sometimes you've got to create that space to do the things. So for me, you know, that's about making sure I go for a run every so often. I'm more in the Dawn territory than the Lynn territory. I'm not really in the Dawn territory. 5K is generally enough for me, but you know, it's about creating that space and doing that. I think the only other technique that I've learned and sort of I use sort of when I'm feeling particularly under pressure around change stuff is something around adaptive resilience and around breathing techniques. And basically there's a whole sort of physiological thing around how your sympathetic and parasympathetic stuff gets out of sync. Basically breathe deeply for a few seconds. It actually resets stuff. And I find that a really useful thing of, if it all feel like it's starting to bubble, it's just a really important way of resetting. You know, and actually, you know, in a you know, we can have a prayer at the same time, can't we? You know, if we were talking in a sort of a non-Christian environment, we say just take a time to think about something, whereas actually we can, you know, you can just it's a good time to have a little pray. But actually that breathing is a really good way of just bringing yourself and sort of resetting the physiological stuff that works. So those are really important for me. But I think, to be honest, and we talk about this quite a lot in Leeds at the moment, is talk to people. The worst thing you can do for your mental health is not talk about it. So talk to people, and just talk to people. And you know, I've often say to my teams, if you can't find anyone to talk to, ring me up. You know, make sure you ring somebody up to talk to, because it's the most important thing you can do.
Yeah, definitely that kind of parasympathetic and bilateral movement. So bilateral movement is when you move one side and the other side of your body. So even as something as simple as tapping your knees, like left knee then right knee, or going for a walk or going for a run, just reconnects the brain and just breathe at the same time. Never forget to not breathe.
Always breathe.
Always breathe. Always breathe. There's loads of chat out there about the importance of making space. And just giving yourself time. It's so important. We say all the time as advisors, just give yourself space. Just figure out what's working and what hasn't worked. Don't jump into things. We've had lots of conversations about this in the past. Don't jump into things just because it was in the past. We must do this because we've always done it. Exactly what you were saying, Johnny. It's so important just to take stock, really, definitely. Liz has said, talking is so important, even when it's difficult, even when you've got to have those difficult conversations. I know us as a team, we've had to have really difficult conversations during this season, and that's okay. It's okay not to get on with everyone all the time, as long as you resolve your differences and talk through those issues that you're having as well. I'm really interested, just to finish, in kind of the imagery that you gave at the beginning, Lynn, about running a marathon and how you kind of get to that 17 mile point and you can literally collapse. And how do you do it if you're leading a team, if you're leading change, and your team around you has been so with you all the way? Yeah, we've got the vision, this is awesome. And then they hit that curve, they hit that 17 mile, and they just go, I can't do it anymore. What you been talking about? How do you lift your team around you?
I used to be a Samaritan, and I think we learned one of the best techniques there. When people are low and they're in a pit or they're on their knees in that race, it ain't a great thing to stand at the top of the pit and lean over and go, hey, come on. You got to get down in the pit beside people. And one of the things that's really been on my heart lately for the church, I think we're really bad at listening. And I think the church should be the best at listening. And And that's what Samaritans were really, really good at. They were good at listening, not just hearing words, they were really listening. You were listening to what was being said and what wasn't being said. But to listen well, you had to be right down beside somebody and where they were at, not trying to pull them to your place. So back to the analogy of marathon, it ain't great to be, 300 yards ahead going, come on. You got to stop, you got to get down, you got to be there in the moment. And then you lift up together, and that's where real teamwork comes into place. But the art of being able to listen, and I especially feel this for young people at the moment. I've got a real burden for young people's mental health. Every day at tea time we have this thing where, look, my son's 13. We have a tea time thing. We started this on the first day of lockdown, and we do it every day. And we have to name our mood score. And then if we're seeing trends upwards or downwards, we always have to say why. Why are we trending upwards? Sometimes those things are to do with chocolate. Like Luke can go from a 7 to a 9, and it's not often around a pizza and chocolate. But we name why we're going up and down. So it's actually doing it together and sticking really tight teamwork through this, I think, is key.
Yeah, definitely.
That's what the cross does as well. That's God coming down to our worst place and our lowest place, and being alongside us. And we've got the best person to learn from is Jesus. And if Christ has done that and suffered alongside us, then we can do that with our teams as well, and know that Christ is there too. And that's really important to remember, that as Jonathan said earlier, we're in this as a child of God, and that means the parent does it together. Like Lynn just said, as a parent, she does it with her son, and God does it with us too.
Yeah, definitely. Does anybody have anything to add? Any super words of wisdom? You've all been so wise this afternoon. No, that was a genuine laugh. As in, I'm really happy. Not like, anyway.
I'm glad Lynn answered that last question, because my answer would have been just sack them and get a new team in at that point. But I'm glad Lynn answered it, so it's fine.
And some of the best things that you can do in this time, guys, for mental health is laugh. Just don't take life too seriously. Things are going to change, and just lean into God. Just get your team around you, those people that will be your cheerleaders, that will urge you on, that will pray for you. Get prayer champions around you, and definitely talk in the season. Lynn and Jonathan. Oh, sorry.
No, God, there's one comment that talks about lament as well, and I think that sort of goes in partnership with that laughter. We have to be able to laugh, but we also have to be able to lament, and do those. And they can go together. That's okay.
Yeah. I think the book. I mean, there's lots of books around, isn't there? But the book, actually, N.T. Wright's book on God and the pandemic and the importance of lament is actually quite a short book, but it's a really good read if on that sense, because it does just bring you back to the point of it all. And the point of where we are and stuff. So I totally agree with that. I don't think we talk about lament enough and create the space for it to do it. I think it's really important.
Yeah, definitely. Guys, thank you for being amazing guests. I wish we could spend all afternoon with you, but everyone would get bored.
Yeah. We love it. There's government guidance to go and read, so
No, I really appreciate it. Keep coming with your comments. I'm sure that we'll jump on and we'll answer anything later on. We'll link some of the stuff that we've been talking about in the chat as well. So thank you so much, guys. Johnny, do you want to lead us out in prayer? Is that okay?
Yep, I will lead us out in prayer. God, we acknowledge your presence with us, within us and beside us. And as we see the changes around us happening and affecting us and affecting the young people we work with, we pray that we would see your hand at work, that we would know we are your children and that we are called by you. We pray we'd keep our eyes on the vision, the author and perfecter of our faith. And pray that you would keep us running the race for you. In your name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, guys. We have conversations every 2 weeks, and we've got a reflection which I think is starting next week for you guys to tune into. So thank you. We'll just wait for Ben.